You're listening to Conflict Radio on the Conflict Radio Network. Greetings, and welcome to another episode of Conflict Radio. This is episode 5, and we're going to be speaking with Craig Webb. But before we get into that, let's go over some of the news for today. It's Tuesday, June 23rd. There's a massive Sahara Desert dust plume drifting towards the United States. I've been looking at this thing on the satellite. It's massive. Just a massive dust cloud. I could just imagine what this is going to do for allergies. A powerful quake has hit southern Mexico. A tsunami warning has been issued. A powerful 7.4 magnitude earthquake struck southern Mexico on Tuesday, today, triggering a tsunami warning along the Central American Pacific coast and as far south as Ecuador. And I'm going to have to follow this story to find out what's going on with the tsunami, but I haven't seen anything going across my screens that anything's been hit anywhere. So I'm sure it's a warning. I'm sure things are fine. And did you guys see this video of this guy? That he caught an 8-foot shark with his bare hands. He was just swimming in the ocean and literally just held it there, pulling its mouth open, posing for pictures. An absolute crazy video of this guy. The beach is full of people. If you haven't seen that, the headline is, "Swimmer catches an 8-foot shark with his bare hands and pulls its mouth open to pose for pics." It's got a video and everything. And I'll tell you, that's pretty impressive. So talking about Craig Sim Webb, Craig is also a widely traveled speaker and musical artist who has done pioneering lucid dream research at Stanford and designed peak performance devices distributed worldwide. His book, The Dreams Behind the Music, reveals little-known dreams that inspired tremendous success for over 100 famous artists. The highlights principles and techniques anyone can use to harvest their own dreams for significant breakthroughs. Now, his website is Craig Webb, that's 2 B's, webb.ca, Craig, C-R-A-I-G, Webb, 2 B's.ca. Another website, applieddreaming.com, 2 D's in the middle, applieddreaming.com. and dreamsbehindthemusic.com. So those are his websites. Go check it out. If you're interested in our conversation and you want to follow up, definitely I'll put the links in the description, and definitely check out his websites. Lots of really interesting stuff to be seen there. So with that being said, we'll go ahead and get right to it. We'll take a quick break, and we'll be right back with Craig Sim Webb. And welcome back to Conflict Radio. We are with Craig Sim Webb. Craig, are you there?
Yeah, glad to join you.
Awesome, man. Awesome. So you're our dream guy, right?
I've had worse titles.
Dream expert. You definitely have quite the credentials here. Why don't you tell us about your recent book?
Well, not exactly recent, but a few years ago, I published The Dreams Behind the Music, which is actually a combination of 2 of my big passions, dreaming here, which I guess you are aware about. But also for many years, I've been interested in and performing music and songwriting also. And so bringing together both, because it turns out I have a pretty high knack, or I guess a pretty frequent knack for lucid and especially musical dreams. So dreams that actually contain music, sometimes soundscapes or sound effects, sometimes just sounds, but most often melodies, something like a hook once in a while, a whole piece, like a longer multi-minute, but usually 30 seconds or less. You ever dreamt music or anything like it?
Yeah, sometimes.
Yeah, it's not too common. Probably under about 10% of the population's had musical dreams that they can call upon with easy memory.
Yeah,
So it's a little rare, and I feel lucky about it.
thinking about dreams that I've had. Like you hear people talking about, oh, I dream in color, or oh, I dream black and white. Honestly, I don't honestly remember if my dreams are in color or if they're black and white. I mean, it doesn't seem like they're in black and white. Like I would notice that when I was dreaming, but looking back, I honestly don't have any idea.
Well, it probably means that what I often hear from people, and when I check with them also, so it's kind of proof based here, or at least feedback based, is that the color is not usually too important, except maybe for vividness of recall, other than when something specific is in a color. I don't know, like the red car, or this person had on a blue shimmering dress, or something like that, in which case then it ends up being important, but more symbolically. If a person remembers something in color, it might just be akin to saying, hey, I really have clear, vivid recall. And so they tune into something that they interpret as color. But the symbolic aspect ends up probably being more interesting and usually more important when we want to interpret and act on dreams. It's actually in my book, The Dreams Behind the Music, there's a number of artists. Pharrell is a huge one, but Sting, many others, I think especially Beyoncé, who actually get visuals, sounds, colors, or sort of more colors, shapes, and then they interpret that as music, or sometimes they get both together or something. So they kind of have synesthesia, which is an interesting variation on dreaming colors and music together.
So I understand that you have a degree in physics. How did you start working with dreams?
That's an interesting one. I kind of got kidnapped, I like to say. I wasn't really interested in dreams. I wasn't against it. I was just minding my own business, studying pretty objective physics at university. And then I did have a powerful near drowning right around that same time. Got stuck under a whitewater raft without really any time to grab a breath. Had a powerful experience of thinking and kind of realizing and emotionally coming to this rich, deep peace. Wow, I'm dying. This is it, under the raft. It was a bit surprising because it was peaceful, which I wouldn't guess, However, after that experience, I did make it out alive, as far as I can tell here. I started remembering up to about 10 dreams a day out of nowhere, like really clear recall, and sometimes into following days. So it was a pretty strange opening. And I started noting the data, at least I was open-minded, and writing them down, started seeing lucid dreams. We can speak about that. Started having musical dreams, which have been continuing since this to this day. And then started having pretty clear premonitions, another interesting aspect of dreams, sort of the psi, or maybe the psychic aspect. I usually don't call it psychic, but PSI, the psi aspect of dreams, where you can tune into people or information or locations at a distance or across time.
So what do you could you define like what a dream actually is?
That's a pretty tough question. First of all, everybody will have a different interpretation. I could go with a rough definition that's mostly accepted. First, we have to kind of choose between the dreams that we have for our life, my wishes, my hopes, those kind of dreams, and then sleeping dreams, or let's say altered state dreams. In the second case, it can be all kinds of variations. It can be dreams that are sort of half awake, thoughts that we have just after awakening, or maybe just before going to officially sleep. And then tons of variation in between and beyond. During the night, we have these long, kind of slow thoughts, and we say, oh, I was just awake, but with electrodes on. And I've had this experience in the lab, in the sleep lab, that it was actually stage 2 sleep, deeper than REM sleep, which is in stage 1. So there's strange variations in there. And then in waking life, we have these daydreams, deja vus, and lots of variations that aren't our current physical sensory input. So they seem like dreamlike events. So when I usually speak about it here today, I'll probably mostly mean visual dreams that we have while physically asleep. It's just so we clarify.
All right. And I was reading an article you did for, is it Veritas introduction? Like it says, have you ever dreamt of being chased, falling, or have your teeth fall out?
Sure, yeah. Veritas was a magazine, national magazine in Australia that I
See,
wrote
now
for
I've
before.
had dreams in my life where I've been like in front of a mirror and I'm brushing my hair and my hair is just falling out. What does that mean?
Well, I don't always go for one interpretation fits all, just so listeners can be empowered. Sometimes you can get a pretty quick archetypal type of dream and give a direct hit or a direct, kind of a universal connection for most people. But remember, every symbol can be a bit personal, even though there's sometimes kind of a universal aspect. In this case, any concern that we might have, as like myself, perhaps yourself, I'm not sure, a little bit older middle-aged gents, sort of concerned from time to time about hair falling out, it might show up in our dreams. Some people have teeth falling out dreams. Usually people who are speakers or maybe on the radio, or sometimes or their looks are very important to them, actors and things. Although there's lots of other levels of universal connection for the teeth falling out dreams. One aspect would be a concern that we have in waking life. So perhaps a connection there. And does that feel like any connection to your dream?
Well, I definitely don't worry on a regular basis about my hair falling out. I've been very lucky.
Okay, good.
In that
so
aspect
perhaps
of things,
something symbolic.
But yeah, it
hair
could be
more archetypally connects with thoughts, what grows out of our head. Yeah. So symbolically, maybe just letting go some thoughts that weren't serving you. What was the feeling in the dream? That's usually the most important thing.
Like, oh shit, my hair's falling out.
So unpleasant surprise.
Yeah, like oh my god, what's happening?
I would imagine something important you were letting go at that time. Do you remember when it was?
No, not really. It's been years. It's just one of those. It's actually happened a few times.
Okay, well, if you track it, you'll probably find something, and this is more general for all the listeners. They can track their own dream the same way. The feeling in the dream, let's say surprise, a little bit upset in your case, will actually have in the day or sometimes a few days before, or once in a while the day after the dream, a very direct connection with the same feeling in a waking event. It's kind of the Rosetta Stone that connects the languages of waking and dreaming, the feeling. And then when you say, hey, where else have I felt this, or where might I feel this today? If during the day, all of a sudden you feel like freaked out a little bit, surprised at having to let go of something, or something's changed that you weren't ready for. Then you go, oh, okay, that's interesting. That's probably connected with my dream this morning or yesterday or whenever it was.
Do you think that it's important for people to remember their dreams and to log their dreams?
It's super valuable. There's tons of payoffs if we start to look at the content of dreams, basically connecting with our intuitive wisdom in a pretty strong way, more direct way than maybe waking life. So direct line to the inner net, I call it, of the subconscious. But also, even just the fact, if we never look at them or try to interpret or go lucid or any of these things, just the fact of writing them down or maybe voice recording them on a smartphone or a voice recorder, it actually helps strengthen or deepen neural pathways that boost that channel of information. And since dreams are pretty much the same as intuition in terms of information, then we are boosting our intuitive capabilities when we just record dreams. So there's a few of the benefits, but we can talk about many of the other very practical ones in waking life. For example, my book, The Dreams Behind the Music, 200 plus artists, 100 really well-known names from McCartney, Sting, Paul Simon, Beyoncé, etc., actually have dreamt many of their biggest hits, Beatles' two biggest hits. Sometimes career guidance, whether followed or not followed, but when followed, very beneficial, and when not followed, sometimes very serious repercussions. John Lennon, a famous Beatle there, actually had a very powerful, I think 3 dreams, 2 of them pretty clear, with specifics, not just vague stuff, where he pre-dreamt his murder about a year before. And he was pretty nervous about it, waking up, and he told people the dreams, and a busy life, etc. He probably forgot about the dreams a year later, but it happened pretty much exactly as he dreamt it with the details. So these things can be very important in our life. Some big benefits there. Not usually quite as serious as life and death, but once in a while.
You did an entire chapter on musicians and their dreaming and how it brought them lyrics and songs and stuff. In fact, you even have some songs with lyrics that you've gotten from your dreams, right?
Yeah, sometimes I dream the music, like Billy Joel. He actually says pretty much every song he's written has come from dreams, and he most often dreams the music. Once in a while, he dreams lyrics, kind of like me. I'd say more like 30-40% of the time I get lyrics with the music, not 100%. about 30-40%, maybe a little less than half. Sometimes I just get lyrics. Sometimes I get inspiration ideas. So it can vary. It's kind of the creative artist muscle, tapping the subconscious directly, especially if we're lucid, if we're conscious in the dream. You can actually look around or interview people or ask the dreamweaver to throw out some music or something, or whatever else we're interested in, artwork or business insights, stock market guidance, friendship, romantic guidance. So lucidity helps boost all of the benefits, but those are a few of them.
So lucid dream, you talked about that a couple times. What exactly is that? That's controlling your dreams, right?
Well, that's the word that's a little more common. I'm not so crazy about the word control, although I know it's out there quite a bit. I like to put forth the idea of having more presence in the dream. So really mindful, more of our waking consciousness, our waking mind joins us in the dream. And then also, if we want, and as we develop more skill with it, because it's learnable, you can, like maybe learning an instrument, how to play guitar or violin or something. It takes a while to become a master. Same for lucid dreaming. We can start to guide the dream more. So I usually use the word guide, but guide respectfully. Imagine if we're directly connecting with our subconscious wisdom, we don't want to power over and change everything and destroy everything, because probably there's some valuable things in there we might miss out on or sort of cut ourselves off from. So respectfully guide is what I suggest when people get a little more
My
skilled.
wife actually had a question she wanted me to ask you while I was talking to you, and she's been having the same dream every now and then for like the last 10 or 20 years. And every time she has the dream, she'll get a little farther, or she'll be able to change things up and do things a little bit differently. But it's pretty much the same dream. She's wanting to know, what does that mean?
Probably it's if it's multi-year, spreading across like multiple years, it's probably directly connected with an important life lesson. We all have some lessons in life school here on Earth. And so when something comes back, let's say more than a few months in a row, as a recurring theme, or at least a recurring idea or some kind of aspect, maybe sometimes a character is the same or a setting, then it's usually directly connected with a strong lesson. I would say in this case, learning to become a little bit more aware of her dreams, maybe to go more lucid more often, and then also develop a certain creative direction. Depends on the specifics of the dream. But would she say, or do you know if she usually ends the dream positively, or is it kind of not pleasant or dark or nightmarish?
I don't think it's nightmarish, but I can't tell you if it's positive or not. Maybe that's the point of it. She's trying to get to a positive ending.
Yeah. Often when a dream recurs, it means part of the lesson hasn't been learned here. Like when we redo a class in school, it's because we didn't fully master it. There's a few examples, very positive dreams that are just kind of a feedback of our feelings, maybe like a flying dream. Hey, we're light and free and feeling clear in life.
Yeah, or swimming underwater, like underwater dreams where you're breathing underwater and stuff.
Yeah, that's pretty much flying. We're weightless. It's just, and in waking life, we don't interpret that as flying. But if you're scuba diving, it's pretty much the same thing. Like my dream this morning, I was scuba diving, but it's, let's say, weightless, free. I imagine if it's not as positive as one of those dreams, that there's a lesson. And she might want to ask herself, and listeners can ask themselves for any recurring dreams, hey, what would be my best ending? And really sit with that. Don't just like quickly answer, but sit with what our subconscious, our deeper self would answer as the best ending. And usually it starts with the feeling. So make sure you include the feeling if it's not so pleasant a feeling. And then you can even visualize the new ending and feel into it just before sleep. And then you give a pretty clear message to your subconscious where you're headed, or where you want to head anyway.
That's pretty interesting. I have a recurring dream that I've always had pretty much since I was a kid. But it's always, I'm in a treehouse, and every time I have the dream, I get to go farther into the treehouse.
Like different explorations, different rooms.
Yeah. Like it's and when I'm dreaming about it, I'm like, yes, I'm in the treehouse. Like I know I'm dreaming. I'm in the treehouse. It's like awesome and great. I love dreaming about the treehouse, and then I'll go and explore and check it out. And then when I wake up, I'm always so disappointed that I woke up I just wanted
so
to go
much more interesting.
just wanted to go farther into the treehouse.
Good. Well, that sounds like your personal variation on a more generic, universal, actually worldwide theme, exploring new rooms or exploring new parts of a structure, in this case, the treehouse. And that's pretty symbolic of developing new abilities, new qualities, or sometimes tapping into old parts of our lives, feelings, memories that we haven't looked at for a while. So it's usually pretty positive, though, so that's good.
So, what do you think causes nightmares?
That's a pretty big one. There's quite a number. I'll start with two big classes of nightmares. One is that it's just more of a physiological dream. Sort of, we had big pizza at midnight and probably too much MSG or something on it. And we have a nightmare, an upsetting dream. Sometimes medication or other substances can trigger that. Sometimes even loud noises can trigger it, although that's usually bridging more into night terrors. These are what I call more physiological nightmares, and depends. Each person uses different words. Night terror, nightmare. Little kids might say, "Oh, that was just a bad dream or upsetting," but they won't say nightmare. So you have to check in a little bit with each person. And then there's more the symbolic level or emotional level dreams that actually have content that's worth looking at. By the way, just to kind of wrap up that first class of dream, when we do have upsetting dreams from the big pizza or whatever Chinese food right at midnight, that's still a pretty clear suggestion. Don't have Chinese food at midnight because we had upsetting dreams, so our body didn't like it.
Do you think
but I wouldn't
that
bother
it's
interpreting
do you think
it.
that it's an ingredient in the pizza or an
Yeah,
ingredient that we're
could
eating
be.
that's causing that?
Any food we eat, and of course medications and things like that, substances we take, that definitely affects our dreams, our psychology, our physiology. So it could be something in the pizza or something that we, the time that we had it right before sleep. And the message is clear: don't do that. The body wasn't too happy about it and had a nightmare.
Can you
If it's
tell?
a little, go
Sorry, go
ahead.
ahead.
Oh,
Yeah, you go
yeah.
ahead. You go ahead.
I was just going to say we can finish yours. I was going to move into the second class of nightmares, which are a little bit
Okay,
more
I
common.
just wanted to ask you real quick. What was the worst nightmare you've had, if you're able to share?
Well, I used to have an experience. This is childhood now. I've moved quite a bit past this, where I would dream there was kind of a evil person or maybe a robber or somebody bad anyway in the house coming to get me. And I wasn't sure if I was awake. I wasn't sure if it was a dream, etc. So I was kind of half awake. Sometimes I would actually get up and stand near the door in case they came into my room. But it was recurring. I remember over at least a few years having this upsetting dream, which is actually a pretty common universal theme. Somebody after me, chasing me, or some person I don't recognize in my house or in my structure, maybe my tree house, my basement, my somewhere. And so for me, there was part of myself that I wasn't aware of that was scaring me. That would be a quick interpretation.
Okay.
More commonly, people usually see this as adults, let's say, or teenagers to adults. They'll see it as chase dreams. But sometimes it's someone knocking at the door or a scary figure outside the house or an animal, a strong emotional energy that we haven't dealt with. Wants to come home, wants to be included, wants to be incorporated. If it's chasing us, it wants to be integrated into our psyche. But it's not always something easy to deal with, and that's why we've kind of pushed it away, and we're bridging into the second type of dream here naturally.
Okay.
The recurring themes, the recurring dreams, where some part of our psyche is giving a strong message. So there's sort of two subclasses for this one. Often it's something from the past that was a trauma. Maybe we had an actual trauma, a car accident, or I don't know, we got robbed or something in the street, something pretty upsetting. And then it's playing out, or a lot of the war veterans have this from really scary waking scenarios that they've lived through.
Yeah.
So it's kind of playing out the trauma and still looking to heal, move through, most often feel the feelings of something past. A breakup could even be a slight trauma, depending how bad it was. And so it's coming back at us. Sometimes it's chasing us, whatever it is, usually a character, but sometimes an animal, a storm, an unknown energy. And it wants us to look at it, feel it, and move past the fear. And then the second subclass, and we can talk some specifics in a second, but I'm just giving the general. The second subclass would be the same thing, but now in the future. And you'd be surprised that actually 2 out of 3 people at some point say that they've dreamt something pretty clear that came true later. And 1 out of 3 people can actually pull up the specific thing. And when we look at it a little more scientifically with sort of checking the data, was it something pretty rare? Did they tell somebody the dream before the event? 1 out of 12 people, roughly, depending a little bit on the population, has actually had a very clear, provable precognitive dream. So it's something that's happening pretty often that we're not really talking about. And they're not always nightmares. Usually nightmares are of that type we usually call warning dreams. There's something dangerous in the way that we're going to decide something the next few days or next week, or there's something in our psyche that's going to cause us a breakup in this relationship or a blowout at this job, or maybe a health challenge. Sometimes the very strong nightmares, like demonic level kind of things, they can be warnings of sickness a few years down the line, and we're trying to heal it emotionally before. So warning dreams.
Oh, that's interesting. That is interesting. Now, there's another class, isn't there? Like a sleep paralysis nightmare.
Yeah, people
Or
always
would you
call them
even consider
nightmares.
those
That's
as
kind of in the
dreams?
halfway between physiological and maybe interpretive. Sleep paralysis and sometimes alien abduction, evil presence in the room. There's lots of variations on the same thing. Is sort of physiologically based. There's a little part of our brain stem, the pons, that switches off the muscles when we dream, which is a good thing. Otherwise, we'd be acting out all our dreams and probably never sleep much. It's a pretty serious disorder when we do that. It's called REM behavior disorder. So we act out all the dreams. But usually it turns off the muscles when we're dreaming so that we can have a normal sleep. But once in a while, the little switch that turns off the muscles doesn't always go on right away. In other words, we wake up, we're conscious, we kind of know we're in the bedroom or in our body, and yet we can't move, we can't speak sometimes. And so it comes as variations on nightmares, or sometimes people have like a demon on their chest. These things are usually associated with what's more generally called sleep paralysis and a few variations. And a quick lesson for anybody suffering from those, because more often than not, people had that in usually around high school or whenever they weren't sleeping very regular patterns, is that there's an easy way out of that. It can actually be a pretty beneficial event if we interpret it a little differently. We have to not go into fear of, okay, wait a minute, I'm about to die, or I'm dead here, what happened? So no freaking out aloud. We kind of shift a little bit, wait, and you have to use some intellect and some courage here, but you say, wait a minute, okay, I've never been as relaxed as this because I can't even move my muscles and I'm probably in bed. So this might be a pretty good opportunity to maybe face the fear of death, or at least relax into what could be a lucid dream or maybe an out-of-body experience, or at least very, very peacefully and slowly wake up. Most people find out that ends after about a minute or two. Have you ever had any of those experiences that lasted longer than a minute or two?
Honestly, I'm not really sure.
Most people say very short.
Yeah,
I've heard it like 4 or 5 minutes, but not like 3 hours or anything.
Yeah, I've had some definite dreams where I've been trying to wake up and haven't been able to wake up. But I don't recall being like in the room, like my eyes weren't open. You know what I mean? Like I was actually, like, oh my God, this is a horrible dream. Like I need to wake up, and I'm not able to. Yeah, but I'm just not able to.
Yeah.
And
well, that might be the same little physiology. It says, wait a minute, there's no need and no point to wake up right now. If we become a little more lucid, this is a friendly suggestion, no critique here, but you might say, hey, wait a minute, when have I ever had as good a chance to face a fear or something I'm scared of? Why would I need to wake up if I could change the ending or at least change my interpretation? And then you can get a little more empowered before it ends. So it could be that's what your subconscious wants, or it might just be your physiology saying, no, it's still time for sleep. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. Now, some people have nightmares on a daily, nightly basis. What would you suggest for people who suffer from nightmares?
Yeah, there's a pretty small percentage who have like regular, let's say a few times a week nightmares. I usually encourage people to check what their sleep habits are first, so that it's not just physiology dreams, basically triggered by the room or is too hot or too many blankets. Sometimes that alone can change it, or too many bedclothes. Not to necessarily always go naked with no sheets or anything, but just kind of think about temperature. Definitely think about diet. So check some of the physiological factors, and then also try to be on the same schedule, so that it doesn't get triggered just by physiological things. If it's not that, then probably the person wants to check a little bit more about traumas that they've lived. Maybe if it's a war veteran, that's a little more obvious. But if it's somebody, let's say, who hasn't been in any super serious physical trauma, what emotional trauma have they lived recently or a while ago? Maybe a relative passed. Maybe they had a terrible breakup or a job loss or, I don't know, coronavirus. So if they kind of check reasons where they might have experienced trauma, that sheds light on things that the dreams are trying to bring to light. In other words, there's some feelings down there that haven't been felt, and the nightmares are pointing to them. And then you can learn skills. Maybe lucid dreaming is one. It's not the only skill, but a pretty good skill that can help us change the ending and usually be free of these types of recurring dreams forever. Should I give an example?
Sure.
So this is a pretty good example. My dreams have actually coached me to share this example publicly because it's got some nice universal archetypes. But a dreamer I worked with, her name was Mimi, which is an interesting name, just symbolically, me and me. But she had chase dreams, which is a very common worldwide theme. 80% of people, or 4 out of 5, have that dream at some point. And she had them recurring, probably about a couple times a week. And she said, how can I get through this and face these things? I'm terrified. And it also ruins my day. I'm tired. I didn't sleep well, and et cetera, et cetera. I said, well, there's lots of techniques. One of them, she liked the lucid dreaming technique. So she kind of went with that, and I trained her a little bit. She said, okay, next time I dream, I'm going to remember what you said. I'm going to try to become conscious. I'm going to look at my hands to make sure I'm dreaming. And then I'm going to try to change the ending. Not just after she wakes up now. This is because she's lucid, so she can do it in the dream, do something new. In other words, not just react and run away, which she normally did, but respond and be more empowered and hopefully more courageous. So she got excited, and I saw her a couple of weeks later, and she pulled me over quickly because we were in a group gathering. She said, I did it. I said, did what? I'd forgotten, And she said, oh, I had the recurring chase dream again, this time in the car, and the pursuer was right behind me. I saw her in the rearview mirror. And so I hopped out of the car, running on foot. And then it was just like all those other recurring dreams, running on foot, some guy chasing me. I remember what you said. I sort of had my lucid moment, and I took up my courage because I still felt the fear, somebody unknown behind me. But I took my courage and said, no, I'm going to do something different. I whirled around and I screamed at the person, this is my dream, and you can't hurt me. And, there was kind of a pause. They looked at each other. And then after a few moments, he said, the pursuer said, hurt you? What are you talking about? I've been running after you this whole time just to tell you, actually, I love you. And she saw that he had really friendly, kind eyes, and he took her hands, and she was like, what? He says, yeah, well, you've been running, so that's why I've been chasing you. And symbolically, it's sort of interesting. He dissolved into her body, and she woke up very energized, much different than all the nightmare endings where she woke up pretty stressed out and short of breath. And then she commented to me just offhandedly, she said, what's interesting in waking life since in about the last week since I had this new dream? First of all, I hadn't had the nightmare again, so that's new. And by the way, I did check with her 2 years later, and she never had it again. So she kind of got the lesson, or maybe healed the trauma. But she said, when I first met her there, I noticed this week in waking life at the office and with my boyfriend, I respectfully, but I stood my ground a little more. I sort of voiced my opinion, or I spoke up for my raise a little bit, or I said something respectfully that I wouldn't normally say because I'd usually run away or avoid it. I don't like conflict. But I changed that, and I think I might have gotten the emotional lesson from the dream, stand my ground a little more. So she was pretty happy with that one. And I think that's what the recurring themes often bring us, especially nightmares, but even other dreams. Hey, what thing is recurring? How do I normally habitually respond? And what might I like to do differently if I'm looking for a more interesting ending, or more interesting waking moments too, if it translates into waking life?
That's pretty interesting. Do you remember what your very first nightmare was?
I don't know about my very first. Probably the one I spoke with you about before, of some kind of evil figure or robber or somebody entering the house.
Yeah. I actually remember mine. I had to have been 3 or 4 years old, at least the first one that I remember, where I used to have a set of dinosaurs when I was a kid. Little plastic dinosaurs that I played with, and I had a nightmare that I was running around my neighborhood street where I grew up, and there were dinosaurs loose in the street, and I remember running to a payphone, because that's what we had back then, trying to call home collect, so that my mother can come save me from the dinosaurs. But Some dreams that we have as kids, some people put off into like a past life experience. What do you think about that as an idea?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of frameworks. Oh, wait a minute. I'm getting a strange echo right now,
You're getting an echo.
like a really strong one.
All right. Well,
Should we retake that question?
yeah. Let's take a break, and we'll be right back after this. All right, we're back from a break. I think we got the audio issue taken care of. You there, Craig?
Yeah, great. No echo now.
All right, awesome. We have the question I was asking was kids and how they have sometimes a past life dream. What do you think about that? Do you believe in past life dreams, or maybe past lives, or what do you think about that?
Well, I think there's a lot of frameworks that we can use to describe the many varied experiences, which are also varied per person and across cultures, don't forget. One of the frameworks we can use is past lives, or kind of a timeline, a linear timeline, past, present, future. From a dream perspective, keep in mind that we're pretty free of time anyway, because the physical senses are mostly turned off during dreams. So to tune into, in waking life, what we might call the distant past, or a time before our current life, or to a distant geography, something physically distant from our current surroundings, or to a future event, something across time, but in the future. It's actually not rare. In fact, it happens pretty much every night for every person, although we don't always remember them or interpret them. So it's not uncommon at all. If we want to talk in that kind of linear time frame, so the past life model, there are quite a few examples of, or at least some examples, I don't know about quite a few. I've come across at least a few dozen, let's say, in my 30 years, where there's pretty clear connections and verifiable too, with different events that have happened in the past, maybe with the person as a past self. One that really sticks out was actually reported on by ABC News, if people want to check it out. It's an interesting one. It's the case of James Leninger. I think the Cuomo, what's his name there? Not the mayor of New York, but his brother, Chris Cuomo, actually did the interview. And they interviewed a child who, at first his parents thought, oh, that's upsetting nightmares. Sorry that you're having those, James. And he said, oh, yeah, I'm in warplanes. They're getting shot down. There's terrible battles going on, and so on, so on. But when the child started having, and usually before about age 5 or 6, so that's important for these type of dreams, because then we get a little bit more enculturated and our inner senses turn down a little bit, and it's harder to tune in like that. But I think he was 4 or so, and he was having these dreams. But they started getting very specific, and he was naming the planes and naming places, and his dad says, I wonder where he's heard about this. I don't think he's ever heard about these Corsair planes or this place near Japan. So he started investigating a little bit, just out of interest, the father did, and started finding that there was actual places. So he took his child to I think an airplane museum or something like it. And he goes, oh, there's my plane, Daddy, from my dream. And he came right over to a Corsair, and he started looking and showing and naming the parts of the plane and all kinds of things, which there's almost no way the young child could have known. So the dad was pretty intrigued, and he started investigating and interviewing about the dreams. And they eventually got to the case where he was shot down in, I think, a Japanese raid, and his partner was right beside him, and he wasn't shot down. And so they checked, and they eventually found the partner in waking life, in physical life. And they tracked it, and the partner said, yeah, he was shot on this side of the engine, but nobody except me could ever know that. And he'd seen, the young kid had seen it in his dreams. So there's interesting verifiable ones, and then others that are a little less verifiable. But my general sense of them, having seen, is that there was a very strong trauma in a past life, if you want to talk about it like that. Mm-hmm. It usually sort of percolates into this life as sometimes night terrors, nightmares, or sometimes very strong fears that don't really have a basis, like somebody might be, often there's people who's afraid of, let's say, spiders or something like that. But maybe somebody's really afraid of ducks, and they're like, what? Where did that come from? But who knows? Maybe in past life they were drowned somehow in a pond full of ducks as some kind of dark Middle Ages ceremony, or who knows. But something where there's a strong connection with a past life trauma that really hasn't been healed. and is actually not too different from our current lives, because we have nightmares about traumas that haven't been healed in our current life. So it's not too much of a stretch for me to believe that it might happen across some deeper level into other lives. So that's kind of what I'd say about that. But I think actually past life and future life elements, and also probable realities, sort of like side timelines, maybe choices that we didn't make as we remember them. Mm-hmm. But some part of our past self made a different choice than we did. Those we tune into all the times in dreams, but it's a little tougher to recognize when we're doing so.
So you believe in reincarnation then?
I believe in a little different variation on it, but I would say that our whole being, our deeper psyche, is much more than, let's say, me in this life.
Yeah, well, I agree with you there. It's definitely much more than just this.
Yeah, and from that perspective, like I said, across time, which dreams can sort of go way above the timeline, it doesn't really seem too difficult. In a helicopter, you can see the traffic, for, 50 blocks, let's say. If you're walking around as a pedestrian, let's say if you're in this life, that's the analogy, then you can't really see more than a block or two. So it doesn't surprise me in dreams with that higher perspective that you can see much more distantly into time and across probabilities.
Yeah. Well, do you think that has to do with the fact that the mind is just tuned in sleep mode? The mind is more open to I guess, experiences like that?
Yeah, I would say that's a pretty good description. You can say one way to think of it, or to say it, is that we have inner senses. Some of them are pretty close to what the physical senses are in our physical body, eyes, ears, touch, etc. And then there's other inner senses, maybe that aren't as obvious, of how we tune into things. Like one example might be in waking life, like radio. We can't really see radio waves. We can't really feel them in our body. I mean, some people can a little bit. But we can certainly see their effects when we have a radio that translates those. Same thing for inner senses. And then there's some inner senses where we can tune into things that are just like almost impossible to translate into waking life, because they're just very alien experiences. So I believe that we're more connected with those inner senses when we dream, yeah.
So premonition dreams, how does that work?
So one of the inner senses is freedom from time, or tuning in across time. That's probably the same one where we tap the past lives and dreams. But in this case, we're pointing the dial forward a little bit, so we're looking at future probabilities. And people might be surprised here. I'm just going to say it because I've worked with many, many people and seen this quite often, that pretty much every night for every person, we're tuning into, at some level, and we may not remember it, but we're tuning into future possibilities, future probabilities, things that are more likely. And we're deciding at a deeper level which events we'd like to experience. Or we're creatively responding to them, practicing our response. So when it happens physically, we're a little more ready. So we're actually tuning into things in the future all the time. You'd be surprised. Sometimes more clearly, and sometimes a lot more surprisingly, like very specific events that then come true. Like I mentioned John Lennon's murder. Another example would be Bono, the U2 lead singer. Mm-hmm. This is in my book, The Dreams Behind the Music, and many other interesting stories like it. But he seems to have a knack for tuning in to create collaborations. I guess he really likes working with other artists. So in one case, he was half awake, half asleep, kind of in that liminal zone or half awake zone before a concert at the Wembley Arena the next day with the band. And he was playing some music in the background, and he was kind of half awake, and he dreamt this melody. Or he woke up with a melody, let's say, and it was Mystery Girl. She's a mystery to me, with a little bit of a melody. And he was, I wonder if I just dreamt that or if I was listening to it. It sounds like Roy Orbison. So he went and looked on the album, which he didn't really know. It was just a soundtrack of Blue Velvet, the movie. Mm-hmm. And he saw there was a Roy Orbison song, In Dreams, but that's not the one he dreamt. So he thought, I wonder if I just wrote it subconsciously. So he started working on it a little bit. He went to the sound check that day before the concert, and he was playing it for the other guys in the band. He said, hey, does this sound like Orbison at all? Or Orbisonic, I think he said. And they said, yeah, a little does. Where'd you get that? Or is that a Roy Orbison song? He said, no, I just dreamt it this morning. Oh, interesting. Okay. He was so into it, Bono was, that even right after the show, you might think he was tired, right? After the show, he actually started working again on that same song. Yeah, I guess after the encore. And then there's a knock at the door in the dressing room, and the guard says, there's somebody here to see you. Should I let him in? He says, who is it? I'm just working on the song. And he says, it's Roy Orbison and his wife. And all the other guys in the band are going, you were pulling our crank. You were joking us. You knew all the time. He says, I had no idea. I never met him. I didn't even know he was in London, let alone at our concert. He goes, but that was pretty strange about my dream. Yeah, let him in. So Roy Orbison, the actual guy who, the Beatles opened for, came in and he said, hey, good concert. I really enjoyed it. I'm not quite sure why, but I did enjoy it. And by the way, do you have a song for me? The second thing out of his mouth, do you have a song for me? And Bono said, wow, I guess I do. And Bono ended up producing that song on Roy Orbison's last album. And that was one of the big hits on the soundtrack for, I think it was Aquaman movie a couple of Christmases ago. Mystery Girl, she's a mystery to me. So he dreamt up a song and a whole collaboration, and we could say, and my guess is, he kind of tuned into a very fulfilling future for himself. First of all, Roy Orbison being at the concert, but then also of a possible collaboration that could be really fulfilling before Roy Orbison passed on. And he brought it to life by remembering the dream and then acting on it.
That's pretty interesting. There's a lot of stories about people who dream they're winning lottery numbers.
Yeah, I've gathered a few of the lottery winners. There's usually a little bit of a catch in those dreams. It's not quite as easy as I dream it today and I win it tomorrow. One of the ones I've seen is the guy dreamt the numbers very clearly. I think he was a taxi driver, except that he did play the same numbers for a long time. He had to play them for 26 years before he got the winning numbers, which was still okay that he won, I think, 65 million. Well, that counts in terms of probabilities, because the number of days in terms of the number of chances to win a lottery is way less in 26 years than the chance of winning. Yeah. Other ones, they usually have to pass a test of some kind or a challenge. Once in a while, they'll get a bit of a freebie, but it's usually not quite as big an amount.
What do you mean, a test or challenge in their dreams?
Yeah, they missed going to buy the ticket, or they might have had a challenge what to do with the money or who to include. Or there's usually a little bit of a catch, or it's a smaller amount. Like sometimes, a little more often, I've seen dreamers, a deceased relative comes and they win a few $100s, just to show them that it's possible and to help them out a little bit. But it's not like 50 million or something like that. There have been a few, and my guess is there was some little key factor in there, but I haven't tracked them personally.
Interesting. So, premonition dreams. So there's cases where people have been able to avoid catastrophe, really, from being warned in their dreams. Is that not true?
Yeah, there's some pretty serious ones. So I just want to do a little bit of an overview. Some of the examples we're giving today are a little more extreme, and people shouldn't really be freaked out about premonitions, because first of all, a lot of people don't necessarily believe it's possible to dream fairly accurately of the future, sometimes thematically, but sometimes almost exactly, right? I can say I actually dream a few times a week pretty clearly of the future, but I'm okay with it. And also I teach and speak about dreams. So it's probably a little more part of my job description.
Yeah,
but it is pretty easy and natural for everybody. Pardon?
I'm sorry. Does that have anything to do with remote viewing? Is that kind of the same thing?
Well, it would be a similar series of inner senses, sort of the channels of inside info that we have in dreams. That kind of info will come through the same channels or slightly varied channels, because like the colors of the spectrum, the inner senses overlap a little bit. So if we see something at a distance, for example, let's say remote viewing, we don't usually tune into or we don't usually experience the actual event in waking life until after the fact, right?
Yeah.
So if you look at it from a time perspective, it actually is about something in the future, except it's also about something physically distant. And we're aiming to look at something at a distance, but we won't find out if we're accurate or not until the future. So there's strange overlaps to these things. But yeah, it could also be telepathic. There's another overlap. We tune into somebody's thoughts, but we find out later when they share the dream with us that, oh, that's the same thoughts that they had. Like actually John Lennon and Paul McCartney ended up having the same dream on a morning very early in the Beatles' career, when they were thinking, should we stay working together? We've had a little success, but it's a lot of time. And they dreamt of digging up gold coins from a can in the backyard. And they said, it's a pretty interesting dream. Maybe we should continue. And McCartney kind of added a little comment when he shared the dream that you could say it might have come true. And I think he's worth $350 or $400 million or something now. So yeah, it came true. So we're tuning in with inner senses to, let's say, unusual things for our physical world. Not too common. People tune in unless they call themselves psychic. But actually, it's pretty easy. Anybody listening to the show, I can pretty much guarantee you could do it tonight if you wanted to, if you believed it was possible and started exploring it. It might take a little bit of skill to really start interpreting correctly and then acting on it. Don't forget, usually it's going to ask us to stretch, expand, and grow some more courage. If it's going to bring any kind of benefit, we usually have to face a fear or move through a challenge. So just keep that in mind a little bit, but certainly we can start exploring right away. So don't end up fearful. A lot of people who have dreams of the future get very scared of it, or they feel guilty. Wow, I didn't save so-and-so because I had this dream that they were really sick or that they killed themselves. They're very serious things. But these dreams don't come for fear or guilt. I just want to really give that early.
Yeah.
But then they can often come for benefit. Sometimes it's touch and go, and it's not obvious which probable future is going to happen. For example, the backup singer, I think her name's JoJo Billingsley. Forgive me if I pronounced incorrectly. But she dreamt of the band that she was singing for, who I'll say in a moment. But she dreamt of the whole plane crashing down in flames, burning, everybody getting really dismembered, and really, really ugly dream, right? And she woke up, terrifying nightmare. And it turns out she wasn't on tour at that moment. She was taking, I think, about a 6-month break. And the next day, the lead singer, who was Ronnie Van Zant, so Lynyrd Skynyrd is the band, actually called her and said, hey, would you like to come and join us for the next concert? I'm not sure. I think it was in Louisiana or somewhere around there. And she said, no, I can't. And you shouldn't go either because I saw the whole plane burning, crashing in my nightmare, etc. And he said, what? And she explained in details. And it was really strong. And she, I guess, was pretty convincing. It was so convincing that he didn't just blow her off. The whole band had a meeting. And 2 guys actually booked flights on other planes. And they were wondering, should we go? Eventually they decided to take the plane as the last flight on that plane, because the pilot had been doing a little bit of questionable stuff, I think, with marijuana and stuff. So they said, okay, this will be our last flight, but we do have the concert and all the fans waiting tomorrow, so we have to go, But the backup singer didn't go, and I guess the 2 guys who booked on other airlines, they did go. And unfortunately, the exact dream did come true, and I think 19 people were injured and about 6 killed, including the lead singer, and many other synchronicities around it. So a very specific, clear, timely tuning in of a warning. Unfortunately, a very serious last-minute warning that some people, I guess the backup singer, followed and others didn't and had a really unpleasant ending.
So what tips could you give somebody who is trying to have premonition dreams?
First off, realize that developing a skill like that should always have as a basis or as an intention, as a goal, let's say, to help people or to grow ourselves. If we just want to, hey, I just want to win the lottery, or something that's just going to be kind of self-centered, or perhaps even darker, how to get inside info on other people and abuse it, or Inception, you saw this movie,
Mm-hmm.
how to change somebody else's world without that usually won't work as well, and probably won't be too inspiring for our overall character growth. But if we take it as a special gift that many people have developed, one pretty big dreamer who actually saved many lives using the skill was Harriet Tubman. You know who that is?
Yeah.
I think there was a film about maybe 8 months ago, a Harriet Tubman movie. And it showed pretty clearly how she dreamt clearly the different ways to walk across streams or places to go to avoid enemies when she was saving and rescuing a lot of the blacks and the slaves. So it could be very practical stuff, but she also trained for like 20 years before. So think of it as a learning curve of a pretty interesting, a challenging skill, I can say, from having worked at it for 20, 30 years. And gracefully sometimes and not so gracefully other times explored what it can mean and acting on it, that it's a powerful thing to know the future in this case ahead of time, have specific inside info that's acting on. We can't just be the same or do the same thing in life that we could have done if we didn't know better. Now we have some inside info. There's a little bit of responsibility added, or sometimes a lot of responsibility. We need to act on it. Not always perfectly, because we're allowed a little bit of learning curve, but our psyche watches, and fortunately it feeds us a little bit at a time. So I encourage people to grow the skill and the learning organically. It's good, if we have a little knack and we've had premonition dreams, sometimes it runs in the family, then explore it. It can become a great benefit for your family, for your health, for others, or creatively for artistic inspirations that could help many people. But then again, remember that it's a pretty powerful, like high-speed inside vehicle of some sort, that we should want to drive it respectfully and learn slowly.
Now that does run in the family, doesn't it?
Usually, yeah. Often, I would say it's passed on by what I call emotional genetics, more than probably physical or DNA genetics. Although even DNA genetics are flexible. But
what do you mean
emotional
by
genetics
emotional?
is that there's a strong belief that it's possible, that it's valuable. For example, certain cultures, and many of the native cultures worldwide, I'd say almost all, have a pretty strong, different, let's say, framework where it's interesting and beneficial to have these kind of dreams. In Native Americans, there's Maskan as kind of the psychic dreams, the Aboriginal dreaming of dream time. There's so many different variations and names. But when we have these kind of skills, that they can be used respectfully and then learned slowly. In fact, just to show you a little bit the edge that sometimes is quite a challenge, the shamans, this is from research worldwide by a friend of mine, research shows that for about 7 to 14 years, the shamans don't really accept their gift or their calling, let's say, to start tuning in this way and tuning into other people's dreams and also, going through some pretty tough life lessons. They don't really want this, and that they, for lack of a better word, go screaming and kicking for 7 to 14 years before they fully accept their calling. So it's a big challenge to have to dance some of these things. Now, we don't always have to become as, let's say, intricate and as skilled as a native shaman who helps the whole community. We can explore a little bit on our own and keep in mind that it should be used for benefiting ourselves and others.
Yeah. Now, a friend of mine has cancer, and he's it's not very good, prognosis, I guess, for him. And
Sure.
they've got him on morphine and all kinds of different pain medications, and he says that the I guess the painkillers or whatever really affect his dreams. Do we know why that is?
Yeah, well, different medications will affect in different ways. They'll definitely, there's strong effects on our physiology, and since dreaming is physiology-based, any medication, especially psychoactive or like mental, mind, neuronal type of medications, like morphine is a strong one, that affect nerves and the brain, etc., that's going to have very strong effect on sleep cycles. So we might have more dreams, clearer dreams, vivid. Sometimes it'll have effect on which parts of the brain are sort of active or not. In other words, lucid dreams, there are specific substances that help with that. Or sometimes certain substances actually more or less limit dreaming entirely, although we can sleep through it. Certain types of sleeping pills and also alcohol, a lot of alcohol, not just like a glass of wine.
Yeah.
But can really limit our actual dreaming. No rapid eye movement sleep if we're strong and certain. So it's strong. Each one's a little different. I would say for your friend, first of all, a lot of empathy. That's a really tough challenge. But that if he wants to connect with that aspect, he probably wants to keep taking the morphine. But he can also do little waking journeys or imaginary explorations in waking life where he doesn't have to be asleep, and he might have a little more success. Or he can tune in emotionally. Sometimes it's a little easier than mentally to whatever the important things he'd like to track or experience. Usually around those times, there's a lot of healing with family or with self, things that we've had a hard time with ourselves, we're not too happy about, or we feel guilty, or et cetera, where a lot of benefit could happen if we track things a little bit emotionally before, I call it graduating from Earth. But having said that, I'll just emphasize again a ton of empathy for your friend. That's a very tough situation.
Yeah, and I was reading somewhere. I was reading up on this a little bit ago, and they were saying that if somebody is say they're dying, and they're dying over a period of a week or 2 weeks or whatever, that their dreams are a lot more different, even if they're not even taking anything. Like like you said, maybe it's because they're guilty about things in their life, or reminiscing more about their life. But do you think that maybe it's possible that the dreams are perhaps getting them ready for a
Yeah, that often
crossover?
happens. There's some pretty well-known themes. Preparing for a journey is kind of the general theme. Sometimes a train ride, a flight, going somewhere, heading out, boat journey, etc. So that's often symbolic of heading out for the big journey away from physical reality. There's often lots of healing dreams with family or with past. Sometimes, depending how much like inner work, spiritual or emotional work the person has done, they can be really beneficial, super happy, enlightening, kind of like, hey, we're ready to jump off kind of dreams. But yeah, definitely we're closer. We're sort of nearing the place where our physical senses have turned off entirely and our inner senses are going to be operating again. So like on the edge of the veil, let's call it, that we're tuning in better. We can usually have more vividness, or we can tune into events like with some of the psychic skills, or, we might actually start already experiencing a future life. And you don't have to be near death for any of these things, but it's probably a little more likely then.
Yeah, yeah. Now, I wanted to talk to you about, you mentioned a little bit earlier, the coronavirus. How does the pandemic affecting people's dreams? Do you think that it is at all?
Yeah, well, there's been quite a bit of research now, I'd be surprised, in the last, let's say, 6 month-ish, to show that a number of people, not everyone, but almost, let's say the majority of people, are having much clearer recall, what they call vivid dreams. My sense generally about that is that people just have a lot more downtime, or the world's a little more relaxed, schedules are a little more relaxed. Not everybody and not all the time. But they have a little more, let's say, time bandwidth, a little more spaciousness. And so it's natural for dreaming to come in clearer, more vividness, more frequency, sometimes more lucidity. Also, when that starts happening, and this has come up to when we have a little more in touch with our subconscious, in other words, more frequent and more clearer dreams, that's when the nightmares come for people who haven't really been in touch before. So if you've just started having coronavirus nightmares or upsetting dreams or recurring dreams, that's probably a good thing. People can check out an article on my website there. It says nightmares, lucky you. And people are a little surprised.
What is the website?
Well, the nightmares article directly, if people want that, they can go to nightmares.info. That's a very quick link to that article. Or they could go to my speaker site, and to my presenter site, and see that's Craig Webb, CraigWebb.ca. And there's a few articles there, how to increase recall and a few other things. One of them is the nightmares article. And it shows some of the worldwide common themes, and it explains why these upsetting dreams might come if we haven't had recall for a little while. Basically, the psyche saying, oh, good, they're listening. Here's the stuff you haven't cleaned out, spring cleaning. And then also it shows some of the themes that probably are likely for a lot of the listeners. Chase dreams, or dreams of falling, or sometimes visitation from a deceased, or nude in public. It's not a super common one, but about a third of people have that, scantily dressed or naked in public, and a number of other universal themes. Car out of control, or the brakes failing, this kind of thing. And then some of the positive dreams. I sort of equate each of the challenging scenarios with a positive scenario. Example, a positive scenario of being closed, trapped, stuck in a small space, which some people have, would be your treehouse dream there. Opening new doors, expanding, exploring more deeply. So we want to change the feeling, and then usually if we change the feeling in waking life, or maybe in the dream in real time, if we're lucid, then usually the scenario changes. And really that feeling, that sort of choosing our response, that can translate into any waking scenario. So it's a very practical thing. We don't react, get fearful, or get angry in waking life nearly as much once we train the new ending.
That's pretty interesting. Well, so where do people get your book?
Well, they can check out Amazon, The Dreams Behind the Music. They could order it directly from the website, dreamsbehindthemusic.com. And I'll just mention that there's a whole number of stories in there of different types of artists, from classical to shamans worldwide, to many pop artists, folk artists, soundtrack, game, like computer game artists, etc., who actually dreamt a lot of their biggest hits. I think 20 plus Grammys, at least that I tracked, and probably many more, came directly from dreams. So there's a very special knack for creative dreamers to tap into this source of very valuable info that can reach many people, or at least intrigue many people. Some musicians track that, and many musicians know that quite a bit. But a lot of the, let's say, listeners might not have thought, wow, they can directly tap their dreams for creative inspiration. And then also, if those people who find this a bit interesting or helpful, or they like some of the things I've shared, I do offer online trainings, teleclass adventures, I call them. Usually a small group, something like 8 to 12 explorers. And it's very interactive. We learn the principles, just like in the book. Every time I show stories, or I show, let's say, dreams of like Sting, I show some of the principles and the ways that he's able to dream up songs like Every Breath You Take, or Walking on the Moon, or ones that have done very well. And so in the teleclasses, we all do our own experiments each week to explore skills, and then we report the results. So it's very interactive, and it's also very sort of empowering, because I'm not just talking and telling people what to do. For that, they can just get a book. And then it's usually a nice, fun community. Everybody learns and empowers and inspires each other. So they can check that out at Applied Dreaming, with 2 Ds in the middle there, applieddreaming.com.
Awesome. Can you offer any dreamer call tips?
Yeah, sure. That's a good way to get the doorway open for some of the listeners. So if you're not having great recall, or you don't remember, or you have a few dreams now and then, but you don't remember too many details, or they're not very vivid in sort of colors and things, start to think of it as a channel of information, maybe like on a music mixer. Have you seen these mixers before that have, let's say, 6 channels? Yeah. One for the trumpets, one for the drums, one for the singer, etc. So on channel 1 of our mixer that we're pulling up as an analogy will be what we call dreams. There's probably lots of sub-channels to that channel, but let's just call that dreams. It doesn't come through physical senses, mostly. And then on the other 5 channels, we have our physical senses: touch, sound, sight, taste, whatever. And then when we're sleeping, most of the channels 2 to 6 are turned down. In other words, our eyes are closed. We're not moving, so the touch channel is pretty low. Balance really isn't changing too much. However, since the dream channel didn't really change, and maybe even went up a little, that we can hear or tune into dreams a lot more clearly then. So that's the analogy to use. And then the specific things that'll really help knowing that analogy is just end up just not moving the moment you wake up. In other words, keep the touch and the balance very low. Don't change your body position. Or if you rolled over and you forgot, then just as soon as you remember, try to roll back to the same position exactly you woke up in. That'll help a lot. Try not to open the eyes, because the visual channel really blows out dreams pretty quickly. Or if you opened your eyes, just close them as soon as you remember. If you can avoid waking up to an alarm, you can always set your alarm for the exact time you need to get up, but set an intention, or what I call a body clock, for maybe 15 minutes ahead. You have to wake up at 7:15, but you set an intention before sleep. Dear dreams, dear body, wake me up at 7 a.m. so I can remember my dreams. And you'll be surprised. It'll wake you up at the exact moment you request.
Yeah.
A lot of listeners have had that. So that's an example of keeping the physical noise input down. In other words, no ringing alarm, no distractions right when you wake up.
Yeah, something that actually has really helped me, and maybe something for you to think about, is there's a sleep talk app on the iPhone that I use, and it basically runs all night. And if I ever talk in my sleep or something, it'll automatically pick it up. But I find that when I first wake up from my dream, what I'll do is I'll talk about it real quick, because I know that app will record. So then I'll go back in the morning and listen, and I'll be talking about a dream that I don't even remember having. Like I only remember it because I'm hearing myself talk about it on the app. So that's pretty neat.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. You and Keith Richardson too. That's how he got the hook for Satisfaction. He recorded it in the middle of the night and didn't even remember recording it, but he heard it on the tape recorder. Bow, 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 bow. So I think that's the specific
really
version
neat.
of the more general coaching I usually do. You don't have to write them down in a book. You can actually record them audio. The only challenge with that is that you usually have to transcribe them, unless you have sort of text to speech or speech to text converter, which I think a lot of phones do now.
Yeah.
But then you can see them later and track them. It's if you're interested in exploring a little more deeply than just here or there, it's good to actually create a bit of a journal or a log or some kind of database, because you can track by themes, by dates, by certain specific characters, by names, etc. And it becomes far more valuable, because dreams don't just come as one-off. They're kind of like TV series. You can get a little bit of insight from one of the shows, but you get a lot more insight when you watch the whole series. So they often come in series.
All right. Well, hey, man, that was awesome, and we sure appreciate having you on.
Yeah, you're welcome. I hope that inspires and empowers some of the listeners. And if they're lucky, I'll wish them happy nightmares.
All right, and we'll try to get some people over to your website, and hopefully, some people are interested and they sign up for your dream class and stuff. And
that'd be great. If they want to have fun with the team and they like some of what we said, there's tons more available. That's appliedDreaming.com.
All right. Well, we're going to wrap it up for now, and we'll be right back after this. And we're back. Thanks a lot for listening to Conflict Radio. Remember to like and subscribe to our channel on YouTube, or you can also find us on all the major podcast networks, Apple iTunes, and we're on Spreaker if you choose to go there. YouTube, we're on Twitter, Facebook. The links are all there. Make sure you subscribe. Hit that notification button so that you know when we've got a new video up. We've got some great things coming up, some great conversations coming up. Later on this week, we're going to be talking about Planet X and what is going on with that. So until then, buckle in. It's going to be a crazy ride the rest of the year, I'm pretty sure, news-wise, all kinds of things going on. So just buckle up, say a prayer for your family. And until next time, be safe.